Good afternoon, sir. My name is Reeves. Would you like to see the list?
Oh, no thank you, Reeves. Just bring me something nice.
Would you like to read the label, sir?
Oh, no need. Just pour.
Hold it. That's ridiculous, right? But some people do take that kind of attitude toward chemicals in the workplace. Most of us work with chemicals every day and may have had some training, but we sometimes forget about the hazards and what can go wrong. People forget to answer 4 simple questions. What am I working with? Can it hurt me? How do I protect myself? What do I do if something goes wrong? That's what's on the menu today. If you can appreciate and understand those 4 items, you'll be ready to use workplace chemicals safely. The first item on the menu is, what am I working with? The quickest way to answer that question is to read the label. The next time you reach for a container of chemical product, stop and take a look. This is important information that serves as your first line of defense. Chemical manufacturers throughout the world are standardizing label information. You may hear this referred to as global harmonization. It's a way of communicating the hazards of chemicals by using the same language and symbols, regardless of what country your workplace is located in. Labels, as they come from the manufacturer, might look like this or this. But they all have the same 5 basic pieces of information: a signal word, a hazard statement, precautionary statements and symbols, a product identifier, and the name of the manufacturer or supplier. The first thing to look for on a label is a signal word. This word is used to alert you to the potential hazard and to indicate the relative severity level of the hazard. Danger is for more severe hazards, and warning is for less severe hazards. Sometimes there is no signal word, but that doesn't mean that the product has no hazards. Next is the hazard statement. This is a phrase that describes the nature of the product hazards, including, where appropriate, the degree of hazard. This could be a word like flammable or toxic, or a phrase like respiratory sensitizer. Precautionary statements and symbols are listed next. This gives a description of the recommended measures to minimize or prevent harmful effects from exposure, improper handling, or improper storage. Examples of precautionary statements might include, use gloves when handling, or keep out of eyes and off skin. You might see symbols or pictograms that represent various chemical hazards. These might include flammables, corrosives, oxidizers, compressed gases, explosives, or toxins. There are special symbols alerting you to health hazards and environmental hazards. You might simply see an exclamation mark symbol like this. This symbol is meant to draw your attention to the written information on the label. The product identifier is the name of the product inside the container, along with a list of ingredients that contribute to the hazards of the material. You may also find the shipping name, shipping numbers, and part numbers. Finally, each label will include the name and contact information for the manufacturer or supplier. Your organization may use a color code system on their labels. Blue is for health hazards, red for flammables, yellow means it's reactive, and white is for additional information. A number within the colored area tells you the degree of danger. It's a number-based system going from 0 to 4, with 4 being the most hazardous. So if you have a 4 in a red area, that means the chemical is highly flammable. If there's a 0 in this space, then there is little or no hazard associated with the product when used according to the manufacturer's instructions. You might also see icons or symbols that tell you what kind of personal protective equipment you should use. Manufacturer's labels are the easiest way to find out about the material inside the original container. But what happens if you put something into another container? Simple. You label it. Otherwise, if someone else comes along, they won't know what's in your container. If you leave it on the workbench for a while, you might not remember what you put in it. Now, if you're the only person using the container, like a bucket of floor cleaner, and you'll use it all during your shift, then you don't have to label it. Still, it's a good idea to get into the habit of labeling.
Let's face it, you can't fit everything about a material on the label. That's where this comes in. The Material Safety Data Sheet, or MSDS.
These documents contain detailed information about a product. It might look overwhelming at first, but it's organized logically into different sections, making it easier to find the information you want. Fortunately, the important information is at the beginning of the sheet. The first few sections have information about the product, the company that makes it, and the hazards, including the short-term or immediate effects and effects that happen with long-term exposures.
Your supervisor can tell you how to get a copy of the safety data sheet at your workplace. If you have any questions or need more information, ask your supervisor.
Whether it's from a label, a safety data sheet, or your supervisor, hazard communication is an important part of your safety in the workplace. It's a lot of information, and it's probably not very practical to try to memorize information for every chemical. What you can do, though, is to organize the materials that you work with into chemical hazard categories like flammables, corrosives, or toxins. These categories make it easier to remember the hazards and precautions for each group. For example, xylene, turpentine, toluene, and lacquer thinner are different chemicals found in paints, but they're all flammable liquids, so the hazards and the precautions will be pretty much the same. Flammable substances catch fire or burn easily. They can be liquids like gasoline, a gas like propane, or a solid like sulfur. Corrosives include acids and bases and are often used for cleaning, etching, or plating. Toxins are materials that can be poisonous to the body. We're used to thinking of toxins as liquids like solvents, adhesives, and lubricants, but they can also be gases like carbon monoxide or sulfur dioxide, or particle solids like zinc or iron oxide fumes from welding, and dust from plant processes.
All that leads to the next question for chemical safety. Can it hurt me? Chemicals can hurt you. Flammables can burn, and corrosives can damage the skin, eyes, nose, and lungs. Those hazards are pretty easy to understand, but toxins are different, and the effects on your body might not always be obvious. Toxic materials could be poisonous to one or more of the body's systems. Their effects can range from short-term problems like rashes or dizziness to long-term effects such as cancer. How dangerous a toxin is depends on how poisonous the material is, how much you've been exposed to, how often you're exposed, and how long. And the effects of toxins can be cumulative, meaning it can build up over time.
Some materials have hazards in more than one category, and you need to protect yourself against all of them. The important thing is to recognize the hazards and use the proper techniques to control them. And that leads to the next question. How can I protect myself? Actually, there are a lot of ways. We'll start with flammables. Safe use of flammables means controlling sources of ignition, including flames, sparks, and other hot work, and using good ventilation to minimize the buildup of flammable vapors. Use containers specially designed for flammable liquids that are unbreakable, have flame arresters, and spring-loaded covers. Keep only small amounts of flammables in work areas, and make sure the containers are properly labeled. Make sure all containers are bonded and grounded when dispensing or transferring flammable materials. Cover containers when they're not in use, and make sure that any flammable soaked rags are in covered protected containers that are emptied regularly. Be sure to store flammables properly. Flammables should always be stored in flammable cabinets when they are not in use. Larger amounts should be placed in specially designed storage rooms which have controls to minimize the risk of fire or explosion.
Now on to corrosives. Corrosive materials come in many forms and strengths and can eat away equipment. If corrosives can dissolve things you work with, they can obviously affect your skin, eyes, and lungs. You need to make sure your personal protective equipment is appropriate to the degree of danger. This includes wearing gloves, protective clothing, and eye and face protection.
Your best protection when working with toxic chemicals is to avoid getting the material in or on you. You can avoid breathing harmful vapors or fumes by making sure there's proper ventilation or by using an appropriate respirator. Avoid eating or drinking hazardous materials by washing often throughout the day, especially before you eat, smoke, or use the restroom. Eat your lunch in an area away from chemical usage. Be sure all containers are labeled properly so no one eats or drinks an unknown substance. Keep hazardous materials off your skin by using protective clothing such as gloves, aprons, protective suits, or liquid-proof boots. And prevent splashes in your eyes by wearing good eye protection, such as goggles or face shields.
So you follow the rules and you take precautions, right? But what happens if something unexpected occurs? You need to know and understand the final part of chemical safety. What do I do if something goes wrong?
Every company should have an emergency procedure for hazardous material spills, releases, or fires. You need to know and understand your role in this process, and that means knowing what you're dealing with and how to protect yourself. Generally, a small spill of a low hazard material needs to be wiped up or swept up right away. Make sure you wear gloves or other protective clothing to protect your skin. Talk to your supervisor about proper disposal of the spilled material. Responding to large spills of certain chemical materials requires special precautions, so don't attempt this type of cleanup on your own. Leave it to the people who have the special training and equipment to do it safely. Your role in these types of emergencies may be to simply evacuate the area and activate your facility emergency response system. Shut down processes or equipment that may affect the spill. If you have a designated evacuation meeting place, be sure to check in with your evacuation coordinator or supervisor. That's about it. If you work with chemicals, don't get lazy and put yourself at risk. Remember to read product labels and be sure you understand the hazards and precautions listed on the safety data sheet. Follow the rules for safe handling and always protect yourself. Above all, ask the 4 questions. What am I working with? Can it hurt me? How do I protect myself? What do I do if something goes wrong?